Is your team working harder than ever before? And it seems like you're constantly making movements and celebrating the wins that you already have. However, it still feels like you're just in a grind. It's overwhelming. And everyone is wearing multiple hats of doing sales, doing business engagement, doing back-end, customer journey fix-up, and also playing a leadership role. How do you measure the true success? And what are the ways that you can actually help your team to streamline so then both yourself and the rest of them have more space, health, and joy as you kick off and continue to grow your organization?
Welcome to Provider's Edge, the podcast that helps healthcare entrepreneurs and innovators break down barriers and control their business, life, and future with valuable action steps. With me, your host, Sabrina Runbeck, a recovered clinician and a business deal catalyst. Let's rewrite the rules and create a positive social impact while increasing your profitability.
Here's a shocking truth that killed a $5 million health tech startup last month, and 72% of companies are making the same mistake right now. I watched it happen in motion, which one of the tech companies I recently spoke to was everything going for them. The backing from millions of dollars in funding and brilliant developer, unique idea, seems like a really groundbreaking technology employed just within 90 days. Not because market condition, but because they were tracking the wrong numbers. Last week, I sat with their leaders, had a heart-to-heart conversation during their board hours, and what would be a final celebration, the champagne toast, and the proud announcement of the 5th feature that got launched this last year. Success seems to be radiant everywhere and people feel super proud. But then their dashboard, I asked what are their retention rate, plummeted 15%. Technical support ticket has doubled and almost devastatingly had 0 metrics on showing whether they are actually improving the exact outcome that they're trying to create. What they recently put in research was simply, do people seem to want the product instead of measuring what existing clients have tried and liked it and how to fix it? On top of that, instead of thinking about the market need itself, they are focused so much on the product itself. So how are any of startups able to fill gaps in the marketplace if they're focusing on the wrong metrics or the wrong problems? This isn't just another startup fumble. This was a preventable tragedy that I'm seeing playing out in multiple different companies, especially when I ask, what are you measuring for success? And if you're generating above 2 million revenue and has significant funding in that Series A, you might want to take a closer look at what you're doing right now. But there's the good news. After having spoken and worked with hundreds of companies, we have identified the exact metrics that separates each company from different revenue stages. And what do you need to truly focusing on, not just what you think you need. Because even you hire larger consulting firms, they often ask you, do you know your problem? Do you know where you focus? And sometimes you do know, sometimes you actually do not. And the question that you're asking probably is not asking the right question. And so people are not able to give you the right answer. So we have to take a different perspective on how do we assess and create winning business strategies that actually doing the right thing, not just busy work, tracking the right outcome, not just any outcome, for you to truly scale and not stuck in the merry-go-round of, great, we have one big client, but how do we implement and create the infrastructure to support that client? Or I can't even open my door because we're already on the top rim of our capacity. Either way, we don't want you to lose out on opportunities. So today we're going to talk about how we can truly boost adaptation into what you are producing as a product and services, as well as to transform that experience in life, in business. It's all about human-to-human relationship and the experience that we create that truly turn visibility and connection into profitability. Now let's talk about 3 scenarios how this really did not go well. Number 1 is how you burn bridges of brilliant people and not even knowing what to do. So despite the competitive nature of salaries and exciting projects, sometimes it was fundamentally broken that people do not stay with you. And the root cause, they were building features at breakneck speed, but had no way to measure their impact on patient care and the direct end users. And I see that often that we talk to founders who are head of product development. What they have been focused on is let's just put more money, let's raise more funds to make sure our product is better. But how do you define better if you don't have enough user to even test it? And even you have thousands of people already on your platform, are you keep chasing new users to come in or optimizing the people that you already have? And the people that already have on your platform, are they the most ideal ones to use your product and services? And we hear this often. People have onboarded larger systems or practices, and seems like a couple months later, there's no continuation. People left their own practice, there's no training, and things stop working. So that what means is, even though you're putting more money into developing a better product, if people are not using it, and if you're constantly just chasing and educating new people trying to use it, how is that going to be sustainable? That doesn't drive result. It just drives heartache. And sometimes it does seem like your developer, your CTO, are feeling like you're just throwing what they call codes in a black hole. And so if you continuously just working hard to build and code, if they're not seeing the true impact and specific outcome, then people feel like there's no goal that they're hitting because there's constantly revolving, moving goal. And when the goal is not specific enough for anything, whether it's the internal team or even from your end users, we wanted to achieve this specific outcome in so many months or so many days, then people at least can see, is that possible? And when we do get to that point in, let's say, 90 days, do we have some type of understanding? Oh, yes, we did that. We surpassed it. Woohoo. Or we didn't quite make it, but we still made enough achievement. We still deserve celebration, or we're way far. So perhaps the predicament from the beginning was not correct. We'll just reassess that. Or something that we really did not plan out to hit that goal that was possible, but the infrastructure wasn't there. Now we can figure out a better way. But if we're just constantly moving and doing more things without something tangible for people to feel there is the end time frame result and both a feel good emotional result and tangible result, then you're going to lose a lot of people who have a different perspective of how they see the world. So our solution would be impact focused metric. So for all of you, how do you do that for your product and services? So I encourage you to try to adapt these 3 key metrics to measure or something similar. Number 1 is the end user engagement score. What do you have to do to get those feedback? How much time does it take to onboard this end user? And how do you measure their satisfaction during the engagement period? And how do you measure their ease of adoption? And number 2, clinical workflow score. How do you want to make sure that the people who are, whether it's a product with patients, that means there's needed to be a workflow, whether it's you directly go after the patient or you have the intro of clinicians, nurses, therapists. Their workflow has to be very easy to be adding on to this additional component. How do you measure that? And that could be whether it's quickly for them to learn the process or how quickly you're onboarding those patients. Not the same as our first metric, which is the patient experience of how they feel, how that works. This is about the back end, right? How is the people who handling things and even people who are left or went on vacation can quickly train the next person to adapt to this new workflow and not losing out gaps, or it's the workflow already integrated into their existing EHR system that doesn't need to have extra printout and whatnot that you guys create. And then the third score that we wanted to measure is that direct revenue impact. Because at the end of the day, we have to have return on investment, not just how good that we're truly changing life, but how can we keep the company sustainable so everyone can be paid? When you are an entrepreneur, you take the biggest risk to create jobs, to create possibilities for everybody else who are working for you and to improve the economy as well. So we do have to measure what revenue looks like and how can you create those type of traction. That also means you understand by books how you are spending money. So when we ask a founder or even anybody in the senior level who have no idea about their numbers, that is like playing games instead of truly building a company. And even you have those locked, are you actually reviewing them on the monthly or quarterly basis? Or just, well, someone else got it, so I don't need to understand them. So what does that mean? And how long do you measure? You wanted to measure at least 90 days at a time to review this. The true return on those success is your retention rate will increase because people can see that their work actually start hitting and matching what you guys have proposed, and they can see the reality. And then for many people who are just like you, innovating mind, the maverick in your company, they kind of wanted to say, hey, how do we even do it better? How do we make sure that things are delivered on time or people are more satisfied? And that can also double your team's output and productivity and drive that internal motivation as people move forward. All right, let's talk about our second scenario, the revenue mirage. A founder celebrated where they just hit $1 million in revenue, which is definitely deserve a celebration. However, immediately I asked, what is the investment thesis for you to reinvest in your own company? Because growth require additional resources. And if we have not thought about everything that we grow is not paycheck to paycheck just to make my payment to pay the staff, not just putting more money into the innovation to build and improve your software or your product and services, what is the percentage? Typically, we say 10 to 15% need to be set aside for growth development. And when people are in that $1 million above range, then you still haven't even put any money aside. You just barely paycheck to paycheck. That's dangerous. That's not sustainable because then you get into the round of constantly chasing the next round of funding or constantly chasing these smaller activities that are not long-term planning and rewarding. So in that sense, be aware of your profit margin and how things can be vanished before you even notice that they are leaving, and which is a fatal flaw. When we think about those smaller percentage to reinvest in your company is because we need to be able to stop, look at what we're doing on the quarterly basis. And once a year, typically we recommend the whole company do an overhaul of SWOT analysis and look into every single component, which we know there are 12 critical components of your businesses. Most people lump many things together and they are overlapping each other, but you have to also think a clear plan of how things are intertwined and not just tunnel vision into what you see is most important. Often we don't know what's the most important and even be able to ask the right question without the outside community coming in who have seen what you need to do to give you that holistic perspective, both on your human capital side, your financial capital side, your intellectual capital side, your culture capital side, and truly your social capital side to expand. So some of the key issue in this round of scenario, number one is customer acquisition cost. One of the company we talked to recently has increased that cost by $2,000. And it's crazy for me to see that how did you let things fester so long before you even look at those numbers? And just putting more money into a bucket, it doesn't necessarily can fill a hole. Number two mistake is implementation speed. The dichotomy is, oh, we have to plan a lot before we do. Yes, we don't like that. But if you didn't give yourself enough time to create a high-level strategy to match your next 30, 90, and 6 months plan, then you're just constantly doing things and throwing money and resources on a problem that might not necessarily get you there. But at the same time, as soon as you create the right strategy, you have to quickly implement. And when you do implement, who are the right people with the right talent, with the right resource to do, and not adding yet another project on them when they're already working on 3 and 4 things? Or you have to help them to figure out what is the true priority in what timeline. Some people are simply not a strategist. And if you make them do the strategist work to thinking in that way, they wouldn't be able to do it. Some of them are just very detail-oriented people who, if you give them that workflow or direction, they can figure out the little detail to get themselves there. But if you didn't give them the overall big picture strategy, then they still not sure from the bottom looking up, what do you guys need? What do you guys want? And same thing as leaders and co-founders. When you are not sharing those specific goals and metrics you want to hit to your team, which that's a very often conversation I have, that I'm talking about and what they're trying to create for the next quarter with one of their senior leader. And the answer I get is, we're not privy to that. I'm sure it's already been discussed. They just haven't shared with us. As the leader, why would you not share? How would the rest of the company be able to help you hit the target if you don't share the ultimate goal, and especially short term to match the long term? So speed is also a critical problem. And number 3 mistake in that scenario is unable to create a supportive, sustainable plan that people are not burning out right in front of your face. I think many of us often feel like, oh my gosh, I just need everybody else who think like me and who will put their 24/7 hours of life into the thing I'm building. Now, that often is the innovator's mindset, but when it comes to someone who even is a co-founder with you, but they come from a different mindset of, I'm here for this mission, but also for myself and for my family or for other things I'm interested in. There's no way everyone can devote all their life and time into something. Even they can, it's very short term. What do you have to actually do to help them to keep the motivation without burning yourself out or dragging your team and your co-founders or your partners through the mud and everyone feel like I don't have room to breathe? All right, the third scenario is what we call the integration insight mishap. A company that recently had been measuring a hospital adoption insight. It's exciting that a large system come to her and want her to be able to educate their entire staff. Now they have multiple hospital branches in this system, and she started with one. Of course, all of us know you have to demonstrate your value for that one entity before you can duplicate and replicate for each unit or each hospital system. Exciting, it is. Now, when it comes to measuring success, what was measured was the completion. How quickly and how many units have you been able to train and adapt? Instead of measuring implementation success, which means the progress you have made with the individual clinicians and the results they are driving. If we're only measuring completion, we often know any proposal of time is being dragged out and very rarely is shortened. And therefore, it doesn't give people a good feel type of engagement when we're just measuring completion. Instead, when we're measuring progress, that at least we know the goal of by this week is on these 80% of work is being taught or being implemented. And how are these work and product service you're doing and the trickle down effect, what other things your client, that hospital system or that unit actually was hoping to get. How are you getting feedback on that? That also, again, is creating more experience, engagement, instead of just dry numbers of you taught 3 units or this units were able to actually use what this system and you adapted, but think more well-rounded perspective of making movements and measuring success. Let's talk about a clinical impact framework. We develop a comprehensive way to measure a system. At the end of the day, everyone feels like workflow is boring topic, operational is boring topic. Yes, creating something that's duplicatable, write it down, who's responsible, in what way, what time frame, and what task is boring. And that's why you need multiple people, leveraging AI, leveraging having the right conversation to put that together. But if we don't have that together, when it's not duplicatable, we cannot measure it. How do we even know what works? All right, so number 1 is really about adaptation velocity. No one uses it, no matter how amazing the product services you created, means nothing, right? So we have to measure for adoption, daily active users, and then feature utilization rate. Also, user engagement patterns, right? The second thing you need to measure is workflow integration score. What does that mean? So time saved per procedure. So if your product service actually can help someone to improve the outcome in the sense of if it's an interoperability one, you're helping the practitioner to shorten the amount of time that they have to put in orders or write their notes or billing, that's time saved. How much time have you been able to measure that? That's really critical, both from existing client who wanted to keep working with you and the future ones. The next thing is error reduction rate. When we take the human error out of the place, leveraging your system, how can we measure the amount of error that reduce? Means could be a billing error, could be a reduced amount of incidents reported by a unit, whatever that means. And the third one under that system integration is process improvement metrics. That also means probably you should know what the existing workflow and process looks like and how your integration and solution help that to make things shorter, right? So if your solution is just helping check-in, in taking the insurance verification process much shorter instead of having patients wait in the office for hours before they can go to the back to see the clinician, that can be measurable, right? Based on time of check-in to actually bring back to the clinic. Think it outside the box. And the third one you wanted to measure the category is time to value measurement, which means how many days does it take you to create success. So that means you know your client's success metrics and first day of implementation to finally getting to the end result. How long is that process? And second thing, time to value is speed to ROI measurement. Means if your product solution is backed by Medicare, Medicaid, it can be reimbursed by each clinician submitting a, let's say, remote monitoring. And to improve that process, how many days or patients they have to see to get them that return on investment. And third is training completion rate. How quickly can you get a staff trained to use your product services? And how many of them, let's say you trained 10 people, how many of those 10 people within the time frame that you set up actually completed? The fourth category we're going to measure is patient outcome improvement. Within those, there are three things. Number one is clinical outcome. How do you want to measure the clinical outcome, in what way and in what time frame? Patient satisfaction score. When they onboard it, there can be a patient satisfaction score that you collect. And after they being on the program for so many days, there should be also another one, and also at completion. Third category within the domain is care quality indicator. How do they feel like getting on board with this new initiative actually improve their overall quality? Be able to measure that. Now, the fifth major category in this is the staff satisfaction metric. We all know business is driven by human and culture capital. If you don't even know how your partners in senior leadership feels about each other and about the work that they're doing, or you don't know the team, then it's very difficult to see retention in your company. And which means you measure three different things. User satisfaction rate. Second one, feature request fulfillment. That means we can see how well people are able to do what they do. And also you can potentially add on some of the personal feedback as you move forward. Now let's put all this together. We wanted to see what do you really needed to create to drive things forward with data. Not just data collected based on user experience outcome. And we really need to put everything together. So number one is patient impact North Star. And you wanted to have a clear defined outcome metrics and link the features to patient improvement metrics. What does that mean? How do you want to define that clearly? Because at the end of the day, there's never a one-size-fits-all solution. And therefore, you have to be clear on what you want to measure and what the client wants to measure. Otherwise, if they don't feel satisfied with your product services, they can pull out at any time. So you have to also measure long-term health outcome, not just short-term. Because if we only measure short-term and people don't like it, then they feel like, oh, there's no implementation. Long-term, then they can pull out as well. Number two is revenue reality check. Means tracking your customers' acquisition effectiveness, monitor the implementation success rate, and make sure you measure the support sustainability. How is your own team have to maintain the relationship with your client? And some people just really difficult to deal with and you don't want to deal with them. And as well as analyzing margin protection. At the end of the day, it is a business. You have to bring back financial revenue to be sustainable. And number three is team engagement dashboard. Create that dashboard so you can really quickly see the features being adapted and impact can be measured. So you can feel good. And so the rest of your team can feel good to keep moving forward, to be self-motivated, as well as how that workflow connected to the patient outcomes. And finally, the revenue distribution need to be measured very clearly for the cost as well as the return. And remember, we said set 10 to 15% aside to reinvest back in your company, whether it was new people, new consultant, new services to expand, or is something that you know you have to double down on you can reallocate those monies to those specific project or features. All right, as we wrap up, a few frequent asked questions are, how many metrics should we track? We want to recommend is to focus on 5 to 7 key metrics that can truly direct, align to the immediate next quarter outcome that you want to target on, whether that's patient outcome, revenue, staff satisfaction, retention, or expansion of the business. All right, another frequent asked question is, how often will we review our metrics? Now, we recommend that you have something that you can track daily, not to say you have to do it, probably one of your team members needed to put on for any of the metrics you want to track. But then once you want to review it, it's either the monthly or quarterly for the leadership perspective. But every other week, you probably wanted to see an entire dashboard on, okay, we're making these tracks or movements, specifically when it comes to the team-based metrics, what you need to focus on deliver versus the patient outcome things you need to track for a longer period of time before you see the change. All right, the third frequent asked questions we're going to answer before we wrap up is, what is the most important metric to start with? We always believe in patient outcome North Star as the most important metric, because at the end of the day, if people are not seeing improvement result moving forward, they are not going to give good reviews. They're not going to share your product services with other people. And the current client that you have might end the contract once the day's up, right? So one of the most basic, I would say, to capture, and the best way to capture is the improvement that you have with the end users, whatever that is the end promise that you're able to deliver. So couple recommendation for your next step. Number one is identify your current metric gaps. What are you measuring and what are you not measuring? Number two, define your patient impact North Star. Number three is implementing a clear workflow to be able to give you that dashboard and visibility on a daily basis and whenever you wanted to follow up with these metrics and be able to show the data to your partners internally and externally. And number four is create your team engagement dashboard. So you actually understand exactly what you need to do to push things forward. And number five, establish a regular review cycle. And some people do it weekly, bi-weekly, or people, when you're managing hundreds of staff or multiple projects, and sometimes you don't have the ability to review all those yourself, that means your co-partners or your manager level need to be able to do that in a more frequent pattern to report back up to you. So be able to discover what that is. We have many resources in our platform. And one of the things to actually understand what impact you have created, there are actually 12 different ways, is go through the impact quotient quiz. You can go to impactquotientquiz.com to find out how you are doing compared to the competitors in your space. And if you're someone who believe you have been working on a great workflow, you understand what the key metric been tracking and willing to share, then we would love to interview you for an episode to share your insights with our community.
Thank you for tuning in to Provider's Edge podcast. We hope you enjoy our latest episode and found the insights and tips helpful. We'd love to hear your feedback on the show and learn what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. So please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and let us know what you think. Your feedback is essential to help us improve the show and provide you with the content you need to take your healthcare business to the next level. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.